Picture a dust-choked road leading to Rome in the summer of 70 AD. The air shimmers with heat as a triumphal procession stretches toward the eternal city. Polished armor catches the sunlight. Crimson banners snap in the Mediterranean wind. 10,000 soldiers march in perfect formation, their sandals striking the stone in unison. But walk closer to that column and you'll see something else entirely. Chained between the legionaries are hundreds of women, their eyes hollow and distant, their bodies marked by weeks of horror that began the moment their city walls fell. This is not a story about military strategy or territorial expansion. This is about what happened after the victory songs ended, when the historians put down their pens and the teachers moved on to the next chapter. What you're about to hear has been carefully edited from textbooks, softened in cinema, reduced to footnotes that most people skip over. Yet every word is preserved in letters written by Roman generals, in legal documents that survived nearly 2 millennia, in the cold administrative records of an empire that documented everything with chilling precision. When the city of Dacia fell to Emperor Trajan's legions in 106 AD, military reports stored in what is now the British Museum recorded the capture of approximately 15,000 women. The official documents described their distribution among the legions and subsequent transfer to the provinces. Distribution, such a sterile word until you read the private correspondence, the letters soldiers sent home to their families. The diary entries discovered in abandoned military camps along the Germanic frontier. A legionary named Marcus Flavius wrote to his brother during the campaigns in Germania. His words preserved on a fragment of papyrus found in the ruins of Pompeii. He described taking 3 women on the first night after his unit conquered a settlement. The youngest wouldn't stop weeping. The second tried to fight back. The third simply stared into nothing, her mind already gone to some unreachable place. He preferred the third, he wrote, because she was easier to manage. That word, easier, echoes across the centuries because it reveals the calculated nature of this violence. This wasn't chaos or the breakdown of military discipline. There was a sequence, a procedure. After a city fell, fighting-age men were separated for execution or the arena. The elderly and very young were abandoned or eliminated based on logistical calculations. Then came the women. They were assembled in the central square, exposed beneath the sun and the gaze of the entire legion for hours or sometimes days while officers made their selections. The most attractive were marked with red dye on the left shoulder and reserved for commanders. The rest were allocated to ordinary soldiers. The Romans even had a formal term for this practice, praeda bellica feminarum, female war spoils. The phrase appears in military manuals, in official correspondence, in tax records because, yes, taxes were levied on this human property. The historian Tacitus recorded what happened to Queen Boudica of Britain and her daughters after they were captured by Roman forces in 68. They were publicly violated by Roman officers, not as personal punishment but as calculated demonstration, a message sent to every tribe in Britannia about what resistance would cost. Boudica later rallied her people for one final desperate revolt, fighting not for territory but for something far more primal, revenge that could never truly satisfy, dignity that could never be restored, voices that had been forced into silence. She was defeated, and what became of the women of her tribe after that final suppression was never fully recorded. We know only this: Britannia did not rebel again for 3 centuries. Is silence always evidence of peace, or is it sometimes the result of terror so complete that even the capacity for speech is taken away? If stories like this matter to you, if you believe history should be told as it truly was and not as we wish it had been, consider supporting this channel by subscribing. After the initial days of conquest came the transformation of human beings into commercial inventory. Survivors were branded with hot irons, symbols burned into their flesh, identifying which legion had captured them and during which campaign. These marks were often placed on the face so their status could never be concealed. Then came the march. Chained in groups of 10 or 20, they were forced to walk hundreds of kilometers to coastal ports where they waited in dark warehouses, stored alongside grain and olive oil until enough ships were available for transport. A commercial ledger preserved in Alexandria and dated to 115 AD records the mixed cargo of a merchant vessel: 340 amphorae of wine, 120 barrels of wheat, 89 women from Judea, 14 Berber horses. Women listed in the same manifest as livestock and produce, assigned the same logistical value. The sea crossing lasted weeks. They were kept below deck in chains with barely enough space to sit upright and certainly no room to lie flat. Daily rations were calculated precisely to keep them alive and nothing more. Many died during the journey from disease, dehydration, or simple surrender. Their bodies were thrown into the sea without ceremony or record. A Roman agricultural writer named Columella, writing in the 1st century, estimated that an acceptable loss rate during the transport of female war captives was between 20 and 30%. Acceptable, as though discussing spoiled fruit, when they finally reached Rome or other major cities. The next stage began at specialized markets where wealthy buyers inspected human merchandise exactly as one would examine livestock. hands probing flesh, mouths forced open to check teeth, bodies examined for signs of pregnancy or illness. The youngest commanded enormous prices and were purchased by patrician households, by elite establishments that catered to specific clientele, by temples offering services to devotees of certain Eastern cults. The rest, those whose appearance had deteriorated during transport, those marked by too many scars, those who still resisted, were sold in bulk to mines, farms, and workshops where life expectancy rarely exceeded 5 years. But there was a fate considered worse than the mines. In every Roman city operated establishments that were legal, regulated, and taxed by the state. Female prisoners of war were the most sought-after commodity in these places because they were foreign, because they came from defeated peoples, because for a few coins an ordinary Roman citizen who had never carried a shield or drawn a sword could feel like a conqueror. A piece of graffiti scratched into the wall of such an establishment in Pompeii reads simply, "Here I penetrated a Britain. Rome is eternal." Even the most intimate act was transformed into a political declaration. The women in these places had no names. They were identified only by origin, the Gaul, the German, the Jewish. They worked in cubicles smaller than 2 square meters with no windows and only a curtain for a door, servicing between 10 and 20 men per day. There was no retirement, no release, no exit. A Roman physician named Cyrannus of Ephesus wrote a medical treatise in the 2nd century that included a chapter on illnesses common among women used in this industry. He described chronic inflammation, premature infertility, and recurring hemorrhages, then added almost as an afterthought that owners should renew their stock every 3 or 4 years, as the merchandise loses commercial value and productive capacity after that period. Renew the stock, as one might replace broken pottery. There are almost no first-hand accounts from the victims themselves. They couldn't write the language of their conquerors and had no access to materials. But there are rare exceptions. A woman named Blandina, originally captured during a campaign in Gaul, later converted to Christianity while enslaved in a Roman household. When her faith was discovered and she was arrested, she spoke during her interrogation about her past. One surviving fragment records her words, "They asked if I feared death. I told them I had already died many times. They killed me the night my village burned. They killed me on the march to the sea. They killed me in the ship's hold. They killed me the first time a Roman man called me property. Death before the lions would only confirm what was already true." Blandina was executed in the arena, but her words survived because they revealed something essential. The trauma was not only physical but existential, not merely destruction of the body but of the very idea of being human. We are taught about Rome's glory, about aqueducts and roads and legal systems that shaped the modern world. We celebrate Julius Caesar as a brilliant military mind while forgetting that his campaigns in Gaul resulted in the enslavement of hundreds of thousands of women and children. We watch films where gladiators fight heroically for freedom yet never see what existed just beyond the arena walls. Never see the establishments beside the Colosseum. Never see the lines of men waiting their turn with newly arrived captives, because that would be uncomfortable, and discomfort is precisely what history demands. There is a tombstone in a museum in London dated to the 2nd century, found near what was once a Roman fort in Britain. The inscription is brief. "Here once was a woman, her name forgotten, her homeland forgotten. May the gods show her more mercy than Rome did." No name, no story, only an anonymous acknowledgement of suffering too heavy to describe. How many others were there? Across 6 centuries of imperial expansion, millions of women passed through the same cycle, born free, captured, violated, enslaved, erased, their lives reduced to figures in military reports, numbers in commercial inventories, footnotes in books most people never open. These horrors were not produced by chaos but by perfect order. The machine operated smoothly. Soldiers did their duty. Merchants conducted business. Citizens frequented licensed establishments and paid their taxes. Everything was legal. Everything was justified. Everything was considered the natural order of things. The question we must ask ourselves is not whether those times were barbaric. We already know they were. The question is whether we have truly evolved or simply changed the vocabulary of the same cruelty. Sexual violence in conflict zones did not end with Rome. The conversion of human beings into marketable objects did not end with Rome. Systematic brutality against the defeated and displaced did not end with Rome. It only changed its language. As long as we look to the past only to admire its achievements while refusing to confront its foundations, as long as we learn from history only the lessons that allow us to feel good about ourselves, we do not treat history as a warning to be heeded, but as a prophecy we insist on fulfilling. The weeping of millions of women whose names were never carved into stone still lingers beneath the ruins. They built Rome as much as its engineers and generals did. They built it with their bodies, with their lives, with everything they were and everything they might have become. So I ask you this: have these horrors truly remained in the past, or have we simply become better at not looking directly at them? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, because this conversation is one we can no longer afford to avoid.